Good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited about this webinar that's coming up. We're just letting people take a minute or two to join in and get settled in, and then we'll kick off probably in about 2 minutes. Thanks. Okay, I see people are filing in. I always have this vision of like a big empty room that's slowly filling in. So I'll give folks just another moment to join, and we'll get started here in just a minute. All right. Well, the room is filling up, so we're very excited to have you join us today. Thank you so much. My name is Aaron Dunn. I head up marketing here at Care Academy, and we're really pleased to be bringing a really interesting conversation with Dr. Aaron Blight on the giving of care. Dr. Blight will give a formal introduction in a few minutes, but he's the founder of Caregiving Kinetics, and has a really interesting perspective on how to engage your caregivers and also get the most out of them, while also at the same time getting the most out of your business. A few housekeeping items. Yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out the slide deck and link to the recording after the event. So look out for your email later today, or maybe first thing in the morning. As far as Q&A goes, we've all been doing these for now forever, but two ways to add your questions. One is using the Q&A function within Zoom. That's the Q&A button at the bottom of the webinar. And you can also use the chat function. We will be monitoring both. Dr. Blight has, about 20 minutes of presentation to share with you, and then we'll dive into questions. So feel free to queue up your questions, and we'll take them at the end of this session. As I mentioned, I'm Aaron Dunn. I head up marketing here at Care Academy. It's actually the two Aaron webinar. We were actually joking earlier that this might be the first time that we've done a webinar with another Aaron, so that won't be too confusing. We'll make it work. And a little bit about Care Academy. For those of you who are current customers, thank you so much for your continued support. For those of you who are not, just a quick word. We are one of the leading providers of training in compliance software, with the goal of helping to empower your caregivers to deliver high quality care and improve client outcomes. We offer you as agencies, at a glance agency insights so that you understand where your care staff is in terms of, have they taken the training? What have they been assigned? Has it been completed? We offer you the ability to deliver compliance reports, for your state and for your payer type, right from within the dashboard at the push of a button. You can also manage external training that you've created. And we have integrations with all of the leading home care agency management providers, such as ClearCare, WellSky, Access Care, Alaya Care, ERSP, et cetera. And we deliver all of our content through a mobile-friendly experience. We do not require a mobile app. You are able to access your caregivers are able to access their training directly from any device, regardless of where they're dialing in from or how they're engaging. So from a mobile device, from a tablet, from a PC. We're also very excited. This past year, we launched an initiative called the Career Path Initiative together with Southern New Hampshire University, where your care staff can actually receive college credit for the training that they already do as part of their work for you. So this is a really exciting initiative that opens up new upskilling pathways for your care staff. And this is available to all of our customers. So feel free to click this link here to learn more and look for opportunities to bring higher level education to your staff. So that's it about us. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Blight. Really excited to have him join us today. He is the founder of Caregiving Kinetics, which is a consultancy focused on helping organizations like you deliver better care and run a more efficient organization. Previously, Dr. Blight ran his own home care agency, so he understands at a very, very, very deep and intimate level what each of you face each day. And prior to that, he spent a number of years working for CMS in healthcare policy. So go ahead and cue those questions about reimbursement rates. We know you have them, and he's prepared to answer them, I think. And also, what a great honor. He was recently recognized as a top 100 healthcare leader. So with that, thank you for joining us, Aaron, and we'll turn it over to you for your slides.
Hello, can you see me, Aaron?
I sure can.
All right. Thank you for introducing me. And I'm going to see if I can get my screen sharing going.
Perfect.
Does that work?
There it is.
Okay.
Indeed.
So I'd like to thank Care Academy for the invitation to be here today. And I'd like to thank you for joining us. I've been looking forward to this presentation. I love speaking to home care agency owners and executives because I have traversed the road that you are on today. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be able to talk to you. I'd like to, let me see here. There we go. To start off, I'd like to give you just a little bit of a background on me. As Aaron said, many years ago, I worked at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I was in national healthcare policy, and my mother-in-law unexpectedly got a brain tumor diagnosis and basically a death sentence. She had immediate brain surgery, and in order to recover from her brain surgery, she moved into our home. She stayed in our home for a long time. She far outlived the doctor's projections, and we became family caregivers. We cared for her for 5.5 years. And near the end of her life, a non-medical home care agency was referred to us, and they were a godsend. We wished that we had called them sooner. After she passed away, I was still in the federal Medicaid program and made a decision to change the course of my career. And I left Medicaid and became an owner of a home care company. I was a franchisee with Home Instead Senior Care. I had a couple of franchises, and I did really, really well within Home Instead. My business far exceeded my expectations. And while as an owner, I decided to go back to school and get my doctoral degree. So I'm not a medical doctor. My doctoral degree is from George Washington University in human and organizational learning. It's an interdisciplinary degree focused on leadership, culture, change, and learning, especially in the context of employment. For my dissertation research, I studied caregivers working in home care across the country. So what I'm going to share with you today is really a result of a lot of that research and that practical business experience. A few years ago, pre-COVID, I had the opportunity to sell my home care business. And ever since then, I have been working with care organizations and caregivers, both paid caregivers and unpaid family caregivers, to help them with their experiences. Through Caregiving Kinetics, I do workforce consulting, training, and executive coaching. I also teach a few classes at Shenandoah University, right here in Winchester, Virginia. So when I was a home care agency owner, and as I was doing my research in my doctoral program, I had these two big questions. How do I find the best caregivers? And how do I keep caregivers? I'm guessing that you probably are asking yourself those questions. They are something that pervades the industry. And I hope that today, the information and the knowledge that's shared will help you to think a little bit differently about these two questions and inform your decision-making about how you can do this better. I'm going to, a lot of things in home care are very tactical oriented, and there's a place for tactical solutions. What I'm going to provide to you is perhaps a slightly different way to think about the lived experience of your caregivers, and perhaps a different mindset about caregiving. Everything that I'm going to share with you today is rooted in research, and it is also based on some practical experience. But by changing the way that you think about and understand the caregiving experience of your employees, it will help you to identify ways to improve your company and the experience of your employees. And I'm going to share with you a model, a lens, a framework to evaluate the care experience. And each of these components of the framework begins with the letter R. Now, it's a little bit gimmicky, I know, but there's a reason for the gimmick. If you simply walk out of here and you can remember these R words, and you can look at a given caregiving situation in your business through the lens of these R words, it will help you to see and perceive a little bit better what's going on and how to address the situation. The first word in caregiving is roles. It's imperative that home agency leaders and caregivers understand the roles that are implicit in caregiving. Now, roles are actually very important to us as human beings. In social psychology, roles are foundational to how others look at us and how we look at ourselves and how we look at other people. So the roles in caregiving are very unique. There is no role of caregiver without a care receiver. The care receiver is the first person to exist in a caregiving situation. The care receiver did not ask to be a care receiver. Nobody asks to be a care receiver. Nobody wants to have a condition that requires assistance from other people, but it happens. So in home care, the emergence of this care receiver is what prompts the need for a caregiver. And if you think about a theatrical production, I'm borrowing the metaphor of sociologist Irv Goffman here, the care receiver is always the star of the show. The caregiver is never the star of the show. Now, there are some caregivers out there that want to be the star of the show. I know that, you know that, but they are not the star of the show. It should be the care receiver. The script in this play or in this production is actually written by the evolving healthcare conditions of the care receiver. The care receiver can't necessarily control the script, nor can the caregiver. And now this is important to understand how this relationship between the caregiver and the care receiver can evolve. The second word in this lens of looking at caregiving is relationships. It's important to honor the relationships that are implicit in caregiving. I'm going to share with you very briefly family caregiver identity theory. It's rooted in applied gerontology from Rhonda Montgomery and Carl Kozlowski. They are world-renowned applied gerontologists, and they view family caregiving as a series of role-based transitions that are precipitated by the changing health conditions of the care receiver. So if we were looking at a wife who is caring for her husband, these pie charts represent the role of that woman in that relationship. And up until the point that her husband's health starts to decline, she's always been a wife. 100% of her role in that relationship has been wife. But as her husband's health conditions start to change and he needs more support and more care, this new role of caregiver starts to enter into the relationship. And over time, these pie charts represent phases over time in the changing and evolving relationship that is occurring between the wife and her husband. And you can see that eventually the caregiver role will overtake the wife role in the relationship. This is what makes family caregiving exceptionally hard for so many people. It's also what makes so many families reach out to you for support and help. But a lot of families don't even understand what's happening or why it's so hard. Now, this same sort of evolution and series of progression is applicable in home care. If you think about it, the care receiver's needs are what will be changing the evolving role of the caregiver in that relationship. As the care receiver, as the client is fairly well, fairly healthy, more or less the caregiver is providing companion care services, not as much hands-on assistance. But as the client's needs increase, as the client's health decreases, the caregiver finds themselves doing more and more hands-on care, more and more personal care. So the PCA is personal care aid. And eventually, the client may become total care and the caregiver is doing everything for that client. The point here is that there is a continual adaptation to the changing and evolving needs of the care receiver. So to put this in context a little bit, I'd like to share with you a quick story about Ginny, one of my caregivers, and her client, Mrs. Jones. So when Ginny first came to work for me, she's like, I want to be a companion care aide. I don't want to do any type of personal care services. Okay, we set her up with Mrs. Jones, who was pretty functional and pretty healthy. And Ginny took her swimming on every day that she went over there. And she did socializing. She enjoyed meals and lunch with Mrs. Jones. And then one day she came in and oops, Mrs. Jones had an accident. And Ginny had to clean it up. Well, Ginny came in and she said to us, I know that when I first started, I said I did not want to do personal care, but because of my relationship with Mrs. Jones, I'll do personal care now. I want to get the training. And I want to continue with Mrs. Jones because it's Mrs. Jones and I have this relationship with her. As time went on, Ginny kept talking about getting Mrs. Jones back to the swimming pool. And eventually she realized through some conversation with us that Mrs. Jones was never going back to the swimming pool. Ginny had to adapt her way of thinking to what was happening to Mrs. Jones, so that she could continue to meet the needs of Mrs. Jones in the present moment. So caregivers, as they go through this long-standing trajectory of caregiving with their client, have to be able to understand that their role is emerging and evolving and adapting according to the needs of the client. The third R word in this framework for caregiving is realities. It is imperative in caregiving to confront the realities of the situation. And in your care organization, you need to confront realities. One of those realities is pay. I'm going to be very honest with you. When I owned my home care company, I often had this dilemma. How much do I pay my caregivers, knowing that whatever I pay my caregivers, that's going to affect what I charge my client. And there is inherently this tension in this business between paying your caregivers and then charging your clients. So one of the hard realities that we are facing today in this industry is that caregivers need to be paid more. They are not being paid enough. And that is part of the challenge with recruitment and retention. Now, I know you're going to find this really, really shocking, but I'm going to tell you something that is in the research on turnover, on employee turnover. The research says that you can reduce turnover by raising pay. Shocker, right? But I didn't go back to school and get my doctoral degree to write a research dissertation that says pay people more money and you'll be able to reduce your turnover. I was more interested in some of what was going on in their head. And I started getting into some of the research on dirty work. There is a whole stream of research in employment that is categorized as dirty work. And caregiving actually falls into that category. You see, caregiving is not glamorous. Gets back to what we said earlier, how the care receiver role is not something that anybody aspires to. Caregiving is full of touching naked people, wiping, toileting, bathing, feeding, not a glamorous role. Beyond that, let's be honest, that caregiving is actually very hard. Physically, moving a total care person, there's a reason why back injuries are so high in this field, but also emotionally, you're around people who are in decline, people who are facing death, families that are challenged existentially at times with caring for a relative who is in decline. This can be very emotionally taxing and difficult. Caregivers are also under more and more stress. COVID has caused the stress of caregivers to go through the roof. There are more demands placed upon them with regulation. Because there are fewer caregivers, there's more need. They're often burned out. There's less relief. So that's the reality of the world that we're in today with COVID. So I'm going to step away for a minute from the caregivers, and I want to talk about your team. The telephone, as you know, is essential in home care. And one day I walked into my scheduling office, and the scheduler was just in the act of just throwing down the phone. And she's like, I can't believe it. Another caregiver is called off. Why do all of our caregivers have to call off all of the time? They are so worthless. Now, that as soon as I saw that, I knew we have a problem. I also started to pay attention, and I realized that all of my schedulers in that office were talking the same way about every single caregiver. So you could have 10 shifts with 10 different clients and 10 different caregivers, and 9 of them might go flawlessly, but one, because of a call off or because of an incident, didn't go so flawlessly. And now we start to generalize because of the one. Of course, we have to expend a lot of time because of the one, but we're overlooking the fact that 90% of those shifts were carried off without a hitch. Now, when your team starts talking like this, they also start thinking like this. And when they're thinking like this, it comes out unconsciously in the way that they interact with their caregivers. Caregivers know what you think about them, even if you don't explicitly say that. So I realized that I had to work with my team and help them to change their way of thinking about the caregivers. I had another scheduler who was the complete opposite. It's the whole carrot versus vinegar. She was always pleasant and kind and friendly with her caregivers. She would welcome them. She would spend time talking to them on the phone. If they dropped into the office unexpectedly, she would take time out to acknowledge them. She would tell them how much she cared about them. And you know what? That particular scheduler, with her carrots, with her kindness, she got caregivers to do what no other scheduler could get the caregivers to do. So in the culture within your organization and you as the leader, or when you talk about your caregivers, what is your tone? How do you perceive your caregivers, and how can you help your team to continue to be positive and supportive of them as opposed to being negative and pessimistic? This is a reality of the business. One other thing that I want to share about this is something about money. In a care organization, of course, you have to be profitable. You have to make money in order to pay your wages, in order to pay for all of your expenses, and in order for you to make a living. My point here is, how do you talk about the business with your team? When you talk about the business with your team in terms of money all the time, then they're going to think that you really care the most about money. And they're going to feel potentially they're going to feel more objectified. They may not be as enthused about doing what you ask them to do. You can take any situation in home care, and rather than focusing it and looking at it through the lens of money, you can look at it through the lens of service, customer service, striving to provide the best possible service at all times. And when you focus on service instead of money, you're getting to the same thing, but the perception of your employees is different. The perception of your employees is that you really want to provide the best service for your clients, and you want to do the best possible with your caregivers. It will change their loyalty to you, it will change their perception of you, and it will change their motivation for working. Now, rewards. It is imperative as a care organization that you cultivate the rewards that are inherent in caregiving. Now, for some caregivers, caregiving is a job. And so there is a reward here, which is a paycheck, and money is an important motivational factor. But there are things besides money that motivate your caregivers. Some caregivers report that the reason that they are in this business is because of the relationships that they have with their clients. Some of them view their work as giving back to others. Some report a greater sense of purpose and meaning in life. Caregiving teaches you how to become a better human being. And some caregivers are proud to be a member of your organization, not just being a member of any care organization, but your organization. And my question to you is, how can you create an organization that your caregivers are proud to be a part of? That sense of pride in organizational membership, pride of being an employee of your organization, will affect their motivation, it will affect your retention, and it will affect your ability to draw potential new caregivers into your company. There was a recent survey that came out in home care that listed the top 5 ways that caregivers want recognition from agencies. And as you look down this list, the number 1 top form of recognition that caregivers are asking for in home care is verbal recognition by a supervisor. 2 and 3 are kind of money related. 4 and 5, recognition by the client and company-wide recognition. So 3 of the top 5 ways that they want recognition have nothing to do with money. Think about that. Think about what you can do as the owner, as the executive, as the leader in the organization without spending a ton of money to give them recognition and to help them to feel good about being part of your company. I want to share with you an experience that I had with my business that goes along with this. Years ago, I was walking down the street in Winchester, Virginia, trying to find a gift for a Christmas gift for all of our caregivers. And I found this. It's probably about this big, just a little pewter pin. And I thought, oh, that totally symbolizes what we want to do and who we want to be as a home care company. So I thought of buying this as a Christmas present, but then I said, well, that's one and done. I don't even remember what I got for Christmas present that year. But I bought 100 of these pins. And I created something that I called the Hand and Heart Award. And I took the pins and I went to a print shop and had these little cards created and stuck the pin on the cards, and then wrote a letter out to all of the caregivers, clients, all of our referral providers, and said, we're announcing this new Hand and Heart Award, and please nominate your caregiver. The Hand and Heart Award is for deserving caregivers who provide exceptional acts of compassionate care. What's an exceptional act of compassionate care? Well, you know it when you see it. And there's no limit on the number of Hand and Heart Awards that you can receive. The only caveat is you cannot nominate yourself for a Hand and Heart Award. Somebody else has to nominate you. So we sent this out, and a few days later, we got a letter from a client's daughter. And she said, hey, I got your letter, and I want to nominate my mom's caregiver, Gloria, for the Hand and Heart Award. Here is why. And she wrote 3 or 4 paragraphs about everything that Gloria does for her mother and what it means to her as the daughter. My HR person brought that letter to me and said, we got a nomination for the Hand and Heart Award. I was like, great. She said, what are we going to do? I was like, oh, let's invite Gloria to come into the office, but don't tell her why she's coming. So she invited Gloria into our office. Gloria thought maybe she was in trouble. She didn't know. She showed up and my HR person came to me and said, Gloria's here for the Hand and Heart Award. What are we going to do? And as you know, I was busy, hadn't even really thought about it. So it was a spontaneous decision like that. I said, well, let's have a meeting. So I went around the room, went around the office, gathered all of the office staff that was there, that was available. And we met together and we formed a circle around Gloria, or with Gloria. Gloria was standing right next to me. And I just said, today we gather to honor Gloria. Gloria is a fantastic caregiver. In fact, she's so fantastic that her client's daughter said this about her. And I opened up the letter that the daughter had written, and I simply read what the daughter said. And I looked over at Gloria, and she was in tears. And she started saying, gushing, about how much she loved working here, how much she loved her client, how much she loved being a caregiver for our organization. And as Gloria was looking at this, I looked around at the circle, and our employees were now in tears. And they started gushing about what a great caregiver Gloria was and how much they cared about her. And by now I was crying. And this was just this incredible kumbaya moment that just happened like that because we were standing in a circle and we read what a client's daughter wrote. So the Hand and Heart Award became institutionalized in my company. I gave out hundreds of these over the years, and they became symbolic and meaningful. Our caregivers who had these pins, they would put them on their lanyards, on their baseball caps, they would wear them with pride. We would share notice of Hand and Heart Awards with our clients on Facebook. So now, with Caregiving Kinetics, I do the same thing. In staff training and community workshops, we give out Hand and Heart Awards. We do it almost the exact same way. And it's, for me, the most special moment of the day. So if you are looking for ways to recognize your caregiver, these S words are important. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It can be simple, sincere, shareable, and symbolic. Those are the hallmarks to great approaches to caregiver recognition. The last R word is readiness. Caregivers are not innately born with the ability to deliver all the tasks of care for a client. They have to practice in order to be ready to deliver the tasks of care. There was a study done of a nursing home in Australia by a learning theorist named Paul Hager. He found that the caregivers who worked in this nursing home they weren't formally trained in Alzheimer's care, but they developed their own way of approaching the tasks of caregiving for people with dementia by showing, guessing, and trying. Over and over again, by showing, guessing, and trying, they developed effective ways to provide care for their individual residents. Really, it's a process of trial and error. Practice makes perfect. Each client is unique. Each caregiver comes with their own unique capabilities. And as they practice, they will get better at meeting the needs of their individual client. So when caregivers go in and they're discouraged, they didn't know how to do things, that's okay. Teach them showing, guessing, and trying as a way of improving. Excuse me. So this lens is a way for caregiving leaders to look at your caregiving team. It's a framework for you for hiring and for retention. So when you're hiring, ask your applicants their perspective on these R words. Ask your applicant to say, well, what does the role of a caregiver mean to you? Tell me about a relationship that you had with a client in the past. What's one of the hard realities that you see by serving as a caregiver in this business? What kinds of rewards do you find in this work? How ready do you feel to provide the tasks of care for your clients? In addition, as you are reviewing your own practices within your business, as you are interacting with your caregivers, you can incorporate this framework. As you look at the way that you are recognizing and rewarding your caregivers, ask yourself, what are you doing for that? If it's simply a bonus and a paycheck, that's great. That helps. But money itself is kind of impersonal and detached. So many people are in this business because of the human side of the business. So cultivate that human side of the business. Cultivate and encourage those relationships that just organically grow between caregivers and clients. As you look through what you're doing as a business leader in home care, how do you talk about your caregivers? How do you talk about the role of being a caregiver? Do you celebrate and elevate those caregiver-client relationships? What are some of the hard realities that you must confront? I will share this at one time in my business because of some of the external pressures that were coming in and affecting my business. I was just, woe is me, the sky is falling. It's terrible. You've probably felt like that a time or two. Maybe you feel like that today. But I realized that I was had my head in the sand. And I decided finally I needed to just roll up my sleeves and confront those hard realities. I formulated some plans and things got better. Imagine that, by actually confronting those realities. Do you cultivate meaningful rewards for your caregivers? And your training, how is your initial and your ongoing training? Do you train your caregivers to think a little bit more deeply about the caregiving experience and the meaning of their work, as opposed to just the tasks of their work? If all of your training is oriented on the tasks of the work, that's great. They can be technically great. But if they don't understand and internalize the deep meaning, the human meaning of caregiving, the motivation is not going to be the same. Tough question, do you pay your caregivers enough? And finally, can you use a little bit of help? That's why I formed Caregiving Kinetics. I actually work with and help executives in home care agencies. That's it for my presentation, for my slides, Aaron. And I think we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, that was great. And like, I think we're both sort of battling colds and stuff. So if you need a chance to get a drink of water or something, you should take that.
I'm just going to open my door.
Open your door. Perfect. Great. So we'll give him a second to do that. Just a reminder, folks, got some good questions coming in on the Q&A, but feel free to add some questions both in the Q&A and or in the chat. So, a couple follow-up questions, if you don't mind. I think, you talk about the pay issue and let's sort of break that down and look at that from a couple different lenses. So, everyone on this call is faced, with finding new staff, and, Amazon's up to $18 an hour, for warehouse workers, and $15 everywhere else. And Target just announced, some people up to $24 an hour. How do you coach agencies to deal with that kind of competition, both from within the industry, but also from the outside? Like, what do we do?
Well, that's the external environment is going to come to bear upon your business. Mm-hmm. And if you are paying significantly less than some of those other employers in your market, you very well may lose caregivers over that. And so you have to sort of say to yourself, well, what do I need? What do I need to do? This is that reality portion of the framework that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And if you need to raise your caregiver pay, then you need to raise your caregiver pay. And you need to express to your clients in a sensitive way that, hey, I'm sorry, but the prices are going up everywhere. The price of labor is going up. And I am raising your rates 100% in order to fund caregivers. And the quality of care that we can provide to you is affected by how much we pay our caregivers. So oftentimes clients are understanding of that. You just got to go to the supermarket and you can see how prices are increasing.
Yeah.
And most clients, they want quality care, and hopefully they're willing to pay for that. You may lose a few if you go too high, of course. But then you have to ask yourself, what kind of agency do you want to be?
Yeah. And that's, that's really I think you sort of expressed that in a nice way, which is, helping your clients understand why rates are going up. It's not just because, you want to charge more, but there's a connection there between rates going up because, it's a competitive market and you need to have room to pay your caregivers more. Definitely an important distinction there. So, let's dive into the fun stuff. So, CMS reimbursement rates are in the news. And that's certainly for many people on this call who accept those services. It's a bit of a challenge. And how should an agency think about that decision to take and accept Medicare, Medicaid clients or versus not, given the reimbursement rates?
Well, Medicaid is really the primary program that would be at play in the question, Aaron. And as you said earlier, I did work at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services before I came to home care. I was a federal Medicaid guy. My role involved reimbursement for non-institutional services, which included personal care. I made a conscious, deliberate choice not to serve Medicaid beneficiaries with my home care company, despite my history in Medicaid. And I never changed my mind. The reason for that is because in the state of Virginia, the Medicaid rate was just insufficient, in my opinion, to provide the type of quality care that I wanted to offer my clients. At that time, I don't know if it's still the case, but at that time, Virginia was number 49 of 50 in the United States in its reimbursement rates for personal care services. Some states are not so abysmally poor. There are some states where the Medicaid reimbursement rate is actually higher than the regular hourly rate for private pay clients.
Wow.
And if you're in one of those states, well, why wouldn't you do Medicaid?
Right.
You may still choose not to do Medicaid. You may not want to have to deal with the bureaucratic red tape that is inherent in serving Medicaid beneficiaries. But if you choose to serve Medicaid and the reimbursement rate is low, then there's a trade-off there. You perhaps are looking at it as charity care, giving back to the community, doing good. And if you make that choice, and you knowingly going into it, that it's a low rate, okay, that's your trade-off. You're doing good, you're helping the community, you're establishing a reputation within the community, but you're not going to get paid well. And you just got to know that you may have to write off some money there.
What's it going to take to change this issue, do you think? It's not that, this is not new, right? People have been talking about this for quite some time. I'm sure it came up when you were there. Is it federal funding? Is it just rethinking some groundswell, with your local politicians? Like, what do you think is going to unlock change here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aaron. And I can tell you that question is being played out at the highest levels of government. The problem is there isn't enough money. That's just fundamentally the problem. There's not enough taxpayer revenue to fund the federal healthcare programs. And so we're operating at a deficit. And the more that we want to expand the federal health insurance programs, the more money that will take from taxpayers or the more deficit spending.
Yeah.
And so how are you going to fix that? That's what those big politicians are for. Between you and me, I'm not sure that they have the best solutions either. I've been in rooms where they've talked about these issues at the highest levels of government, but I honestly think that some of the best solutions are with families and with supporting family caregivers and helping them to leverage resources that are available in the local community and helping them to receive assistance in caregiving. And as families expand their own capacity to care and their understanding of the needs of their loved ones, they can do a better job helping them at home with the assistance of home care agencies.
Right. Well, it's good that people are talking about it. It's a little hard to see how change is coming, but I think that framing the understanding of, if you want to take it and why you take it, and, to your point about doing good in the community, I think that, is an interesting way of thinking about it. So thank you for that. We'll get to some questions from the audience here. So you talked a bit about caregiver recognition, and I think your hand and heart pin idea sort of really sort of resonated for folks. But it also felt a little serendipitous, right? You saw this thing and it sort of all just clicked. So how do you help people get started, so they don't have to wander around town for a couple of days to just stumble upon the heart and hand?
Well, some of it is really kind of looking at the ways, first of all, that you recognize your caregivers. And you probably have existing programs. And one question is, how frequently can caregivers be recognized and how can they be recognized? So if you have a workforce of 100 caregivers, for example, and you have a caregiver of the month, well, that's 12 caregivers in a year that could be recognized. So that's 12% of your workforce. 88% is not being recognized. So I would suggest that you expand your ability to recognize your caregivers. And then you can come up with different ways to shape behavior and reward the type of behavior you want from your caregivers. And in the case of the Hand and Heart Award, the criteria of exceptional acts of compassionate care was very deliberate on my part. It was broad enough to encompass anything. It was, there was no limit on the number of awards that could be given. And at the same time, it incentivized caregivers and helped them to understand, what do we really want you to do? We want you to go above and beyond just the basic day-to-day tasks. What can you do to be exceptional? And the caregivers responded, and they also recognized one another. This is another part of it. So often you have 2 or 3 or 4 caregivers that are with the same client, and they sometimes have a tendency to point fingers at each other, criticize each other.
Yeah.
And this type of approach flips the thinking and allows you to watch your caregivers see the good in one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it really does require, I think, a little bit of thinking about what are you trying to encourage, what type of behavior are you trying to encourage, and create reward structures around that.
Got it.
And also expand the number of caregivers that can receive that recognition.
Yeah, that's a good point. 1 a month is not a lot. Well, so you sort of touched on it, and dovetails nicely with the question from the audience, which is centered in on caregiver conflict. When they have conflicts with each other, you articulated pointing fingers at each other if they're on the same client case, or perhaps having even conflicts with the client themselves. Clearly, that wouldn't be award worthy, but these issues come up. I mean, how do you coach people to kind of handle those situations?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's something that home care agency owners always have to focus on. It's always important to allow the caregiver to express their point of view on what happened, give input. So listening is super important for your caregivers. Sometimes people simply want to be heard. And so when you take time and you sit one-on-one, and this is an important part of it, one-on-one with the caregiver in question, give them the opportunity to fully express their point of view, their experience, whatever happened. Acknowledge their point of view. Maybe even give them a few props about things that they did right.
Mm-hmm.
and then chalk it up as a learning opportunity for the things that they did wrong. If there are multiple caregivers involved, you may have to sit one-on-one with each individual caregiver and go through that same process. And you may never exactly know 100% what happened, but you know your caregivers, and you may have a sense of how things evolve. And so after those one-on-one meetings, you may need to sit down as a group with all of them, or 2 or 3 of them, whatever the case may be, to resolve the final issue. This takes time. You also have to be willing to take the time. If you just want to, do a rush to judgment, discipline the caregiver, you can take that approach. But I promise you, over time, if you continually take that approach with your caregivers, it's going to harm your business. It's going to harm your relations with your caregivers. But if you take a listening and learning approach, your caregivers will appreciate it, all of them. Yeah. With clients, sometimes clients can be understanding, and sometimes they're not understanding.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can be super nasty.
Yeah.
And they can tell you and just berate you up and down for what your caregiver did or did not do. And, you have to listen to the client and say, you'll do the best that you can to resolve the issue with your caregivers. You may have to make a reassignment of the caregiver. And some clients you just cannot please. And there were a few of those that I had personally where I made a decision that it was not worth it for me to continue to service that client.
Yeah, that's hard.
It is hard. It's a hard decision to come to, because you want to provide service. You don't want to lose business. But then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the cost of doing business with this client?
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. I noticed 2 more L's in there. So so it was listen and
very good. Maybe it will be a new blog post.
There you go.
Right. Thank you.
So another question coming in here is centered on decision. When you started your agency, you went the franchise route, so partnering up Homestead. But plenty of people on this call are independent. How did you think through that decision, and was it a good decision in the end? As independents are thinking about, should they join a franchise, or if people who are in a franchise are thinking about maybe doing a little bit differently, kind of what's the math there? How do you think about that problem?
Yeah. Well, there are pros and cons to either becoming a franchisee or going independent. For me personally, I was leaving a national healthcare policy position. I had not been in the business, and I thought I did really analyze this decision quite a bit, because I thought, well, if I go on my own, I'm not beholden to anyone. I don't have the restrictions of a franchise network and a franchise format. But I also don't have the support and the knowledge and the things like group purchasing that would be available through a franchised system. And so ultimately for me, I chose to go with a franchise system. I'm very glad that I did. I, of course, paid for that in royalties and other fees. So that's the trade-off. But and I would say this, for me personally, as a relatively new franchisee, my relationship with the franchisor was very important to me. I learned a lot from the franchisor, and the franchisor helped me to become a better business owner. But over time, as I became more capable myself, my relationship with the franchisor became less important, and my relationship with my fellow franchisees became more important, because my fellow franchisees were in the exact same position as me. They had the exact same type of business as I did. And I developed relationships with some of my fellow franchisees that really, really helped me to be better as my business evolved. So if you're independent, you don't have the benefit of the franchisor-franchisee relationship or the franchisee to franchisee relationship. However, as an independent, you also can, run your own show, right? And you're free to experiment, to try new innovative ways of providing different types of services that a franchisor could say, no, you can't do that, violates the franchise agreement. And so there's something about being independent that is also very attractive.
Got it. Interesting. So we're coming up on time here. So how about I leave you with just one final question? We'll make it rapid fire in 2 minutes or less. So you ran, how many years did you run your agencies for?
It's about 10 years.
10 years. Okay. So it's probably not a fair question to say, what's the one thing you learned over those 10 years that you'd wish you'd known on day one, because a long time, but let's put it that way. What's the thing I wish I just learned that earlier?
This question, Aaron, I would maybe, this is a personal answer. And I know that this may not be the same for everyone, but I wish that I understood this about myself, that running a business that is 24/7, 365, you never, ever close in home care. You are constantly round the clock providing services to your clients out wherever they live at whatever time of day. There's no weekends off. There are no holidays off. You're always on the hook, and you can get a phone call at any time of the day or night on holidays, and that can ruin your day. It can ruin your week. And for me personally, I never, ever was able to fully detach myself from that. That kind of responsibility weighed on me all the time. And it had an effect on me, so I think that some people are better at detaching themselves from that. It wasn't my forte. I took it personally. If a client's daughter called me up and just started screaming at me about something, even though my caregiver, whatever happened, I had nothing to do with it directly. Well, I took responsibility for it, and I internalized that a little bit.
Yeah.
And so as an owner, I wish that I had known that about myself, and maybe could have been a little better at handling that.
Would you do it again? Knowing what you know now, would you do it?
I am super grateful for the time that I spent as the owner of a home care company. It shaped so much of my life today. And I am super grateful for the home care owners that I get to work with. But would I do that now again? No, I would not.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, and we're in a very interesting time as well, which is adds to the just the inherent chaos, unfortunately. So
yeah.
Well, this is a great conversation. I truly enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of great takeaways in here. I'm going to have R's and S's and L's running around in my head for the next week. So I appreciate the simplicity of that. Definitely works and makes it real for folks. Another R. And so I wanted to thank you, and on behalf of the Academy, on behalf of the audience, thank you for joining us today. And for the audience, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we will go ahead and send out the recording of this. And if you have any questions, post this call, feel free to reach out to us directly. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.